You out there? All right, welcome everybody to another edition of Beyond Recovery. My name is Matt. Today I am honored to have a special guest on, Dana KRULL of the I Kissed Alcohol Goodbye podcast. Dana, how are you doing today?
Dude, I'm super. Thanks so much for having me. This is fun.
Oh, for sure, dude. Yeah, you were like, I'm really glad that it worked out, that you ended up being my second official guest. I had Salim, shout out Salim. He was my first guest probably a good couple of weeks ago. I was traveling last week, and dude, like, since I got into the Instagram like sobriety recovery community, which is fantastic, by the way.
Yeah.
You're such a standout, just because, like, well, first of all, let's speak about the owl there. Let's introduce the audience to the owl.
So this is my spirit animal and my bro in recovery. His name is Al K Hallfree. It's cheesy, but I love it, and it works. So yeah. I love Al. He was in the garden for a long time, and then all of a sudden it dawned on me. Like, I would always call him Al, but like just Al the Owl, like AL. But it's funny because now it's like the pun for. But yeah, whatever. I'm not that creative of a guy, but I thought it was funny.
Man, that's so funny. Like, you just mentioned it. I actually have a garden owl. I wonder if these two are related. Do you think at some point they may be? I mean, the garden
they have to be cousins somewhere.
Right?
I'm assuming that the owl community, it's like 6 degrees to Al K Hallfree or whatever.
I would assume so, right? You know, like where you talk about like the Hawaiian or like Samoan heritage, where it can just like they're all cousins. At least totally. If nothing else, they're cousins, guaranteed.
They're maybe third cousins twice removed or something. We'll have to get them linked up. We'll get them on Instagram.
Twice removed, former roommates, something. Yeah. Anyways, awesome. But yeah, Dana, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, man.
Let's jump right into let's talk about your podcast, because we did a little bit of a show swap. I'll be showing up on your podcast, in
I can't wait to have you. Thanks for letting me go first, by the way. Like to be the interviewee. Very vain of me.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And then if I ruffle any feathers with you, you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to get this guy.
Oh God. Yeah, that's right. I'll get you back, man. No, it's all good. I try to be super laid back, and ask me whatever, man.
Appreciate it. But yeah, let's, before we do so, like, I Kissed Alcohol Goodbye. What is the genesis of that podcast? Let's tell everybody that hasn't heard about it what it's all about.
Yeah. So 60 some days ago, I think 2 days from now, I think I'm like 68 days. I had left the house for a few days because just my wife and I were having a really hard time communicating, and I was drinking too much, and I just said, I'm leaving for a few days. And I crashed at this cheap hotel that's over between our house and the Amazon warehouse where I work one night a week. At the time I was working a few nights a week. And so I was like, screw it. I'll just go over and I'll just drink in the hotel room. It was stupid. And so I just had this one, I just realized, like, I can't keep doing this. I mean, I had gotten sober in summer of 2020 and gone through some IOP, outpatient recovery stuff through that the VA set up for me with a local civilian place that was great here in Central Ohio, and got sober, stayed sober for a year, but it just a lot of other just regular life things happen, like it doesn't matter if you're married and you have kids or you don't, or what, like life just happens. And we had like just financial drama, family drama, stuff that happened. And I wouldn't say I white knuckled it for a while, but I finally kind of gave up because I was trying to do it myself. And so now we're in the summer of 2021, and I was going back to work, and I was working these weird hours. I started at UPS, and what was supposed to be a 25-hour a week job was quickly becoming 40 hours. And I'm ashamed to say, like, I can't do that now, at least not on that sleep schedule. I mean, in the Army, where I was for a long, long time, a 12-hour workday was kind of standard. When you're training or deployed, it's like 18 hours a day. You just get used to it. But here in civilian life, I'm like, God, I can't even work like an 8-hour day without flipping the hell out. So anyway, like the drinking got progressively worse across the span of the fall and into the winter. And early January 6th, I downloaded this app called Reframe. I just knew I got to do something. And there are dozens of recovery apps out there. lots to choose from. I just happened to choose this one. It's got like a brain for an insignia or whatever. So like, hey, brain, my brain's fucked up. So like, let's, you know, let's, and I hope this is an F-bomb safe zone, because I'm probably going to lapse into them.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'm not going to offend any of your viewers, or any viewers and listeners. Thank you all for bearing with my potty mouth. But I just downloaded this app, and I started to, they've got daily check-in Zoom calls. Like when we hang up from this, I'm going to be doing the daily weekday afternoon call for 30 minutes. And it's a lot like an AA meeting, that I had gone to some AA meetings with a friend of mine in the past, but I'm ultimately getting to your question, I promise. Like, so I just, you know, I stayed sober for a couple of weeks in January, and then I found an excuse to start drinking. I had an argument for something stupid. Like, I mean, you know, married people fight over stupid stuff. And so I used stupid fight about nothing as an excuse to just, you know, be a teenager, maybe a toddler. I don't know. It's like, I'm going to drink again. And so it just kept getting worse. I mean, it was the point where I was having 8 or 10 or 12 a day. And that's really bad. That's the worst it had ever been. And when we got into mid-February there, I was coming up on my birthday, and I'm like, God damn, like I'm turning 42 this week. This is the same week that I was going away to the cheap hotel and, you know, driving drunk to work, showing up to work drunk. I'm like, who the hell am I? God, I used to be an Army officer and serving them, you know, with Rangers and stuff. And here I am doing all these like flagrant integrity violations I never thought I would do. And I was like, God, I'm thinking back to my 21st birthday, and you know, Addie and I went to what is stereotypically a party school, Ohio University, and they're infamous for their Halloween party where like 100,000 people come and just get drunk, and it's kind of like Mardi Gras or something like that. It's crazy and it's fun, but you know, they've also got what's called the Court Street Shuffle. There's like 20 some bars uptown, and so you start at one end of the street and you work your way up. And I mean, I blacked out on my 16th bar, I think. My favorite buyback, I blacked out on my favorite bar. Like, yay! Like, and there's a picture of me slumped over my friend Sarah that night, like with all the stamps, and I'm like completely passed out. And you know, I'm thinking, man, I'm twice that age now. Like, what the fuck am I doing? This is not cool. I've got a 14-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 7-year-old, all boys. And like, what am I training them about manhood? So something came out of that where I just said, this, enough is enough. And I switched my track. Reframe's got 2 tracks. You can do cutback track, or you can do abstinence track. And I'd started, I think I accidentally started on the abstinence track, and because I was like, oh, I can stay abstinent. Again, I made it like 2 weeks and then totally fell off the bandwagon. But yeah, it just, the podcast came about a month later when I was watching Joe Rogan, and I'm not a huge Joe Rogan guy, but like, just for some reason, he came to mind. I'm like, I'm going to watch Joe while I'm doing the dishes or some crap. And because my wife and I, by the way, roll reverse. Like, she's now working. She homeschooled the boys forever when I was in the Army for like 8 years. And now that they're older and I need some time to kind of like get my mind right, she's graciously gone to work so that I can stay home and homeschool the boys. And so, you know, doing the dishes or something one night when she's at work, and I'm like, I'm going to watch Joe Rogan, and I'm like, I just need something lighthearted. So I see he's interviewing Snoop Dogg. I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm listening to Joe Rogan and Snoop Dogg. And so within the third minute, Snoop's rolling a blunt. And so of course Joe's smoking up with him. And I like, again, maybe I shouldn't think that's funny, but I was like, this is friggin' hilarious. But then in the 30th minute, Snoop just out of nowhere goes, Joe, man, I want some alcohol. He goes, can I get drunk on your show, Joe? And he's like, hell yeah. They like bust out all these bottles of booze. And I'm like, oh my God, like I want to sit and have a drink with Joe Rogan and Snoop Dogg, right? Because they do such a great job in that podcast of making you feel like you're right there in the studio with them. And I was like, I got to turn this shit off. And so I was thinking, like, why is there not a podcast that interviews people that talks about sobriety? And if I would have Googled and seen, there are like dozens of them already, but me being who I am, I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna start a podcast. So I go on like anchor.fm that a friend of mine had from the Instagram community had recommended. And I started out on Instagram just as a lurker. I mean, I made, it was an anonymous account, and I don't know where this I kissed alcohol goodbye thing kind of comes from. There's an old Christian lit book from like the turn of the century, like 98 to 2000 ish, I think. and a guy, I forget his name, but he was a big dude that time with one of the Christian, like I think West Coast Christian movements. And he wrote this book called I Kissed Dating Goodbye. And it was kind of like, if you're a young, even sort of evangelical like I was, then this was a book that you had at least heard of. I don't think I read it, but I just thought it had a nice ring to it. Like, I kissed alcohol goodbye, because that's how I looked at it that last night in the hotel. And oh my God, this is a long answer to a short question, but like,
Go for it,
hey,
awesome.
you didn't
It's
know
awesome.
what you were, hopefully you knew what you're getting into inviting me on here, but
Okay.
but staying in that cheap hotel, it was like my last soiree with my mistress. And I had said before that I committed spiritual adultery with the Army. I told my soldiers all the time, I was an infantry officer, I became a chaplain, and then went back to being an infantry officer. It's a whole long, weird story. I'll spare you and your listeners from it. But I viewed it as I'm having this adulterous relationship with alcohol. And I know that she's toxic, and sorry, I'm just calling her she just because I don't know. I'm a average white male heterosexual dude. So to me, it was, she's my mistress and she needs to go. And so I just started the podcast and just have been winging it ever since. And the fact that you have intro music on episode 2, dude, you're my hero. I'm like 10 episodes in, and I can't even get the friggin' mic to work half the time. So you're crushing it. So there's long answer number 1. Thanks again for having me, dude.
Oh man, thanks. No, that was a fantastic answer. I find the first few questions that I ask, I more than encourage. I want that big, full context, beautiful answer that you gave. So thank you. Fantastic. As far as intro music goes, like I'm staring in the background there. You got a ukulele. You could do a little live off the floor intro music for yourself if you wanted to.
Let me blow your mind, because I've been.
Can you go grab it?
What do you got here? Show you something different.
Oh my goodness.
For homeschool music class, we've been like studying all different kinds of genres and stuff. And I had never heard of, this is going to blow my, I got a couple Australian friends on Instagram. This is going to blow their mind. This is called the didgeridoo. And it's an Aboriginal tribal instrument. And you play it. I can't even, let's see if I can.
Can you fire that thing up?
Like, I really suck at it, but man, it's awesome. And if you guys your listeners need to Google didgeridoo and watch some of the Aboriginal guys playing it. It'll blow your mind. It's so freaking cool.
You have to get that kind of circular breathing going on.
Yeah, the circular breathing, does this, and they actually there's a thing on Spotify, didgeridoo trance music, because it's got kind of the same beat as trance. Sure. It's so cool. Like, dude, the shit you learn in homeschool, it's crazy. Hopefully my boys don't pick up my potty mouth, but
so I'm predicting by a year from now, when we do a follow-up show, certainly we're going to do more shows in between.
Absolutely.
But I'm calling it, so 2023 April, your entrance music or your intro music is in fact going to be the didgeridoo. I'm
going to try to do that by the time I see your challenge and I raise you, because I'm going to interview you here in a couple weeks.
Yes.
I'm going to try to work on this Joker, because I needed some sort of catalyst.
There we go.
Because I just I get into it, and I used to play the saxophone, so I'm familiar with having to train these muscles, right? but I didn't really play. It's kind of like also, I guess, a tuba or a trombone or a trumpet, where you got to so I got to train this stuff, but I also got to train this, because after about 30 seconds of that Joker, I'm like, this is freaking hard. Yeah. So yes, didgeridoo freaking music is coming.
Wicked. There we go.
Look out, sober family across the world.
Rad. So mark the day, April 25th. It has been committed to.
It's been decided.
Yes. Tremendous. That's awesome, dude. Yeah. So you know what? There's a lot to unpack. Let's go back a little bit further into your past. So we kind of did some recent events here. Let's go even further back. Let's go back, roll back the clocks into even if was there anything in early childhood that you could map back to? It was man, early experiences with alcohol, whether it was a parent, a grandparent, anything like that, where you're just you know what, those are kind of the breadcrumbs that led me up to that, the first answer that you had there. What are your earliest memories of alcohol?
That's a great question. And I mean, my dad worked I joked that my dad had a brown collar. He wasn't blue collar. He wasn't white collar. He was a brown collar job, because he worked at the shit plant, and he worked at the wastewater treatment plant for 26 years when he got home from Vietnam. And his dad was a World War II veteran. and had served with Patton's Third Army and Bastogne and all kinds of, I mean, crazy stuff. It was awesome. So I'm third generation combat veteran, which is really cool. I had that link with my dad, but my dad died when I was 19 of lung cancer because he was a lifelong smoker. And so my earliest memories of alcohol would be dad just drinking PBR, coming home from work, coming home from the shit plant, having a beer or two, but it wasn't anything crazy. And I'm told by my mom and my uncle and others that dad would go out with his dad back in the day after he got home in the 70s, 60s and 70s. I guess he was in Vietnam late 60s. So like in the 70s, he would come home and go out to the local bar with his dad and have I remember my dad saying 2 beers and 2 doubles. So that's probably my earliest memories. The first time I tried anything was just at a buddy's house. We were probably 14. And I mean, suburban, I went to a college prep school. I was like your token, like lower middle income kid that was in the college prep school on financial aid and just had a lot of wonderful friends. Almost all of them were from very wealthy families. So we're up in one of the wealthy suburbs, hanging out one night, and we like sneak out of the woods, with like half a cigarette that we stole off someone and like half a beer that was left. Right. Who the hell that was? I remember being like, this isn't very good, but it was just the kind of that it was almost like a rite of passage is what it felt like, oh, okay, now I'm a teenager. And so now I'm going to try drinking,
Totally. It's funny that like, there's so many stories like that. And it's always in the woods, isn't it? Like that for me, that's what it always takes. Like grab like whatever you can, dash out into the woods. And it's just like, yeah. And it's like some warm, like half a beer, like you say, or like
it wasn't cold. It was like, it was
cold.
gross.
It
I'd be like, oh, this is nasty. Like,
yeah.
Like
dude, you do the bitter beer face and pretend you like it. You're like, yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Oh my God. I forgot about the bitter beer face.
Yeah. Right. Oh dude. Yeah. That's so funny. So funny. So definitely. And then like, yeah, I mean, man, the military background and all that. So it's such to me, just hearing from your story, like, it's like this duality of, there's discipline, there's like, these strong sense of values and all that. And then there's this other side of you that always wanted to cut loose. And it's like this, like Jekyll and Hyde almost that you're kind of constantly battling with. So
absolutely. I mean, I'm your classic, like, overachieving perfectionistic people pleaser, student council president, scholar athlete, went to college on scholarship and was the cadet battalion commander in ROTC and blah, 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 blah. Like I was that guy. I didn't let you finish your question.
No, yeah. I'm glad you chimed in. Like, exactly. You're just kind of filling in the blanks a bit more. So it's like, so when you get to that stage, it's like, you're kind of deep rooted on both sides. Right. So how different did you feel when you were drinking, or did you feel like it was kind of one and the same? Did you feel like you were living this split life? The reason I ask is because you mentioned this idea of this mistress and that sort of thing, right? So it's like, did you feel like two different people, or was it just like, how did you resolve these two sides of you that were very opposites in a lot of ways?
I don't think it became kind of the duality aspect until probably leaving the military, because up until then, it was just such a throughout high school. I mean, I remember even my senior year, like I drank. I remember like wearing like a badge of honor, like, wow, I drank every weekend this fall and still, had straight A's or whatever. And, so it was just kind of par for the course. ROTC culture was, I mean, just like any other college group. It was kind of not expected, but I mean, almost pretty much everybody drank. And so when I went into the military, I was kind of on like Addie and I got married, and she's one of the unicorns that went to OU that really didn't drink when she was there. I think she had a drink or two here or there, but she was in the marching band, which is the marching 110. They're fantastic, but she would go to band parties and just be the one that kind of hung back and laughed at people, and just got enjoyment and out of just seeing everybody else get shit faced and make idiots of themselves. And so, when we got married, I mean, we had beer and liquor we had an open bar at our reception, but it didn't get out of hand. I think I had a couple of drinks, but it wasn't anything big deal. And for the first couple of years, for several years of our marriage, even, like, I was an infantry officer for a couple of years. I felt called to go into seminary to become a chaplain. And so until I was 30, I really wasn't, I'd kind of taken this long pause. And so I never really thought of myself as it was just my drinking up to that point was kind of like socially acceptable drinking. And then going back into the Army as a chaplain, it kind of kept me, because my tradition that had ordained and endorsed me was they didn't tell you not to drink, but they were like, hey, it's probably best if you don't drink. And so because I knew myself and I knew that I had kind of an addictive personality and that I could go, that I could overdo it. I think again, I was able to kind of keep it on the back burner. But when I got into, because of my prior infantry service, the chaplaincy took me and was like, "Ooh, this guy went to Ranger school and he's airborne qualified and he got all this stuff and he's done all this stuff already." Because some chaplains come in and like don't even know how to wear their uniform, and God love them, because like the military needs both. You need guys that, you know, because you got to have guys and gals that connect with soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines from all different experiences. But I mean, they threw me, it was a meat grinder, man. I was like straight to sworn as a chaplain, went on active duty, and 6 weeks later I was in Afghanistan for 11 months, and baby born in the middle of that. And, you know, when I was home on mid-tour leave, that was our second son. And then I got back from that and was immediately sent to fill a vacancy at a Ranger training battalion, which is the Ranger school. So I was on cadre there. And while I was there, we had just gotten settled in. And then the chaplain of the Ranger regiment asked me, hey man, are you interested in coming over to the Ranger regiment? I'm like, of course I am. That's kind of one of those things that you don't, I mean, I had been dreaming of doing that ever since I felt called to ministry. I was like, man, maybe I could be a Ranger battalion chaplain one day. So within my first 39 months on active duty, I'd been in 4 different battalions in 2 different states. And we'd had another kid. And then a year into that dream assignment, you know, Addie had a really rough pregnancy with our third. And so but I didn't drink through all of this because I was so busy. It was like, this is such a prestigious thing to be here. And I know that I could screw it up. But what happened during that period was I started to have a beer or 2 at night to unwind when Addie and I would hang out. And she was the one that called it. She said, you know, you got to be careful with this, or whenever you get out of the Army, even if it's 10, 20 years from now, like you're going to have a drinking problem. And I'm like, it's just a beer or 2. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I'm doing fine. Like this is me needing caffeine in the morning well, I don't really need caffeine, but when you're ADHD, it actually calms you down. So like caffeine to chill me in the morning and keep me going. And then, you know, beer at night to just kind of unwind. And as usual, she was right. And so when I got out and my job no longer, well, you would think, I mean, I was working at Lowe's, my first civilian job out of active duty. And, you know, then it became 3 or 4 to unwind from shift. And I was working goofy hours. At least in the Army, like you have these hours that, you know, like, okay, when I'm in the garrison environment and we're not out training or deployed, I'm going to work from 5 or 6 a.m. to 5 or 6 p.m. And I'm going to get weekends off. I'm going to get training holidays. I'm going to get federal holidays, all these things. And so there are like these planned little pauses where you can catch your breath. But, you know, in retail management, I mean, it was, you know, run around schedule, and it totally screwed with me. And having the PTSD shit that I have, that I still don't want to admit that I have, you know, I'm waking up in the middle of the night and worrying about some angry lady's fridge. And like, is this fridge going to come in tomorrow? And like losing sleep over like appliances and shit. My brain is going like, this is serious. This is like, you got to do that. Like, you know, like I'm going to be a jump master on a friggin' airborne, you know, airfield seizure where I got to account for 30 paratroopers on this side of the plane. They're my responsibility, and I got to do my job right so they don't die when they jump out of this goddamn airplane. So, you know, there were all these things going on, and it just kind of spiraled from there. And then went to another job, and you would think, you know, working for my church, and that should have kept some boundaries on it, but it just, I was doing grad school, trying to get a different degree to do writing. And oh my God, that's another long answer, but it just is like the duality didn't really probably occur until after the Army. And then especially when I got into where I was, you know, running this soup kitchen and food pantry for my church. And it's one of the biggest ones in Central Ohio. And it was super stressful. My fight or flight was activated every day. I got sucker punched there. And I mean, it was crazy. It was a bad time. And so I was drinking a cope. I mean, I was what I would call walking wounded, but just using it to survive. And then when that job ended a couple of years ago, at the beginning of COVID, the soup kitchen shut down for like this crazy maintenance thing, and they ended up letting the whole staff go. And I was like, I blew a mental head gasket and ended up in a VA hospital for several days. And that was what led to me getting sober the first time. But again, after IOP, I was doing it by myself. And so I made it a year, but you know, the difference now has been not to jump ahead and like preempt any of your questions, but the difference for me now has just been the community, specifically the Instagram community, and which is funny because I can't stand social media, but I gave it a whirl one more time.
For sure. No, a lot's to unpack there. I'll start kind of from the back and work my way back as far as I can remember everything that you said. Yeah, Instagram community is fantastic. I found it to be the same. I was always a little bit hesitant and a little bit guarded with my own forthcoming with my own sobriety.
Yeah.
Part of that for me was like, that way I didn't have to be as accountable. And now that it's out there, there's this extra layer of accountability because I'm putting myself out there as, sober Matt. Right. So, I imagine it's the same for you in that sense. Right. And it is so supportive, that being Instagram community. So really a shout out to everybody that I know is going to be listening to this and is following you and myself. Like, man, it's such a wonderful, genuine place. Like there's no, that's the impression I'm getting. I don't know how it's been.
Me too. I have not really seen much toxic stuff, and anything that was toxic, I just blocked it and was like, I don't need that in my life. Exactly. It really was like one or two things in a couple of months.
For sure. And similarities between, like it resonates with me, what you're saying about social media. I was always very hesitant with Instagram specifically because we, in the pre-interview, we were talking about like shiny objects, right? What is more shiny object than a bunch of wicked, edited, filtered pictures? And you're like, look at, oh my God, look at it. I even now, like I find myself going on there a fair bit just to kind of check in on things. Right. And then 5-10 minutes later, you're like, oh crap, we got to put this down. So, but overall Instagram, incredibly positive for the things that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So just, going back to, like if I was to pinpoint just from hearing your story and your conversation where things really took a shift for you is this, with what my body caught anyways, was like the PTSD aspect of it.
Yeah.
This sort of feeling of being unable, or like you say, coping, essentially. You've used it as a coping mechanism, getting from like your previous life of being in the military, and then you're trying to integrate all these different things that you have been through without really a gap to get into the real world as it were, which ends up being retail. And then to your point, your brain doesn't differentiate between somebody that may or may not get their fridge tomorrow versus people that their lives are in your hands, kind of thing, right? So your brain is staying up here, and as a result, you're finding something that you can kind of just lower the vibration down, even for a small part, part of a break or part of an evening or something, right? Is that safe to say that's kind of where it really took that
totally
shift?
It was like, just trying to take the edge off, and just the only time that I could really relax was if I had a couple of drinks, and it would calm the nonstop, tape that's running. What about this? What about this? What about this? Whether it was work or home, and then when I was doing grad school in the middle of all that, and I was trying to do trauma therapy at the VA. I mean, it was like trying to do way too much. And we had gone through so many life changes all at once. I haven't even like peeled off all the layers of the onion of what was going on for us religiously and with family wise and everything. I mean, it was just total chaos. And so, it was like, this is going to give me a chance to just breathe tonight for an hour. I'm going to be relaxed and it'll help me go to sleep. So it was okay until it wasn't. Sure. And for me, the slippery slope really starts at 3 to 4. Like as soon as I go past 2, I'm done. But really now I see I can't have one. There are a lot of people that say like one is never enough, one is too many and never enough or whatever. Yeah. However that expression goes, like that's me. Like I can't have just one. It's like fucking Lay's potato chips or something like that.
Very similar. Yeah. What is the quote? I know which one you mean. It's like, one is too many, but a million's not enough.
Yeah. That's what it was. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. No, that one always, like when I first,
I'm not very good at math.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Math was not my strong suit, but and lots in there. And like you're saying, let's talk a little bit about, because I know there's a lot of folks that are in early sobriety or recovery that are doing the whole white knuckle thing. And like when you say you do the first year is so like challenging, but also fulfilling to get under your belt, because you've gone through a Christmas, you've gone through Thanksgiving, all the seasons, right? All the different triggers, you've had that full spectrum of the full year. But in the meantime, when you're doing white knuckling, how was it for you, Dana, as far as like, because you mentioned you fell off. What's the difference in the way that you feel about your current one, where there's some community, there's some connections, there's this layer of accountability provided by yourself with your podcast, versus that first year? which is still a hell of an accomplishment, but you were doing it, yeah, let's face it, white knuckling by the sounds of it, by your own admission. What's the different feeling between the two?
Yeah. And it wasn't that hard the first year. And this is one of the reasons why I kept thinking I'm not I try to not use the term alcoholic just because it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. It absolutely, if alcoholic works for you as your term, that's totally cool. For me, I just, I'm saying, as someone who had a problematic relationship with alcohol, however I want to make a euphemism out of it. I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. Like I've got alcohol problems and I didn't have a lot of cravings. So I thought I was so stuck in my head inside. I'm like a professional ruminating navel gazer. And I convinced myself that like I made all this shit up for attention, that the PTSD is made up for attention, that the being spastic. I mean, at Lowe's, my nickname on the sales floor was Spaz, and rightfully so. I mean, I was like 1,000 miles an hour. I mean, and what's crazy is like you and your peers are like, man, this guy's freaking crazy. But I'm like, I feel chill right now. Like this is like Dana at like 75% for me, but everyone else, that's still like 150% because I'm just so intense. And I guess for me, it didn't feel like white knuckling for most of that year because I had what I had was using to occupy my time was day trading, like a lot of people did during the pandemic, and especially when stimulus cash came out, there like the market was just awash in all this crazy money and people were just buying everything. You could buy anything and it went up for a good period of time there. And so I started making some money and I was like, man, I'm making more doing this than I made, maybe I can provide for our family just doing this. It was fine until it wasn't. And I got greedy and gunslingy and gambly. And I, by this time last spring, I had lost it all and then some, and slowly watched it. The white knuckling was for it became a control thing because I'm an over control guy, is something I've learned from my therapy with my multiple shrinks. And in the Army, that's praise, that works. You're supposed to control things in the Army because that when you're taught, like if you take your eye off the ball or your eye off the mission, the objective, like somebody could die. So you don't, sorry, Al.
Almost took a spill there himself.
Al's used to me. He's like, I don't know. We need to get him some actual claws so he can defend himself. But like, I was focused on this day trading stuff, and it's like blinky, red and green lights on the screen, and not like the Matrix. But I'm like, it engages me, and it keeps my ADHD brain focused, and it was pleasurable. But there's dopamine there. Like you sell something and you make $100 in 2 minutes. You're like, oh my God, I made $100, and then you're like, fuck, let's do it again, And so like it just became this thing where I kind of depended on that because things were deteriorating just with my extended family and when that kind of fell apart unexpectedly, like I won't go into that whole thing, but that's when I was white knuckling, was when the trading started to fall apart last spring. And then I was kind of like, I think the slippery slope started with, well, I'm having trouble sleeping again. So I think I went back to like cough syrup or something, or NyQuil or whatever, which is like 10% alcohol, right? But I'm just just take a double dose, whatever. I'll just do a couple shots of NyQuil and I'll be good. But I remember thinking that very first one, I was like, this is like a Pandora's box here, and I shouldn't do this. But I justified like a good alcoholic or an alcohol addicted person, whatever you want to call me. Like that's where it started to come apart. And then when it got to the point that I realized I need to go back to work, like I can't, unemployment had run out, and I just was like, I was like, I got to go back to work. And so I'll do this overnight, but I'm in now homeschooling the boys, and I love it. And I want to be able to do that. But I was so depressed and felt so defeated in so many areas of my life that I just caved. I caved. We were at a party and there were like alcoholic drinks there. And I snuck one and told my wife afterwards, hey, I poured a little shot of something in my Pepsi, and, I'm 41 years old. I should be able to have a drink. And off it went, one became two and two became three, and the rest is history. So white knuckling, the difference between that and this, thank God I remembered your original question before I went on 16 tangents. There's got to be a mathematical term for that too. I'm going to Google that when we're done. Tangents on tangents.
Right.
I'm trying to, my 14-year-old and I are doing algebra 1, and I'm like, oh my God, algebra, I forgot. I like it, but it's like, oh no,
Yeah,
polynomials
algebra.
nightmare.
Man, yeah.
But and then I talked and forgot the question. No, the difference between the original attempt and this one is without a doubt building the external accountability into my life. And I think I was kind of expecting my wife to I told her all along after I came back from I shouldn't call it the loony bin. I just used that's it when I came back from the VA hospital, we'll put it that way, from the mental ward there. I told her, like, I don't want you to feel like you have to be my handler, like you have to be my babysitter and you have to be my mother. But, I needed her in that initial part to provide some accountability. Like, here, I'm going to the store, I'm taking this card, and you check the card when I come home and make sure that I don't bring booze home or whatever. But we only did that for so long. That's not fair to her. So, but I think in the back of my mind, it was like, I'm still kind of leaning on her too much for my own recovery. And so this time it became, I think it was a subconscious thing. I think I started the podcast probably subconsciously because I was like, I need to have exactly what you said, which is, there have been some times in the last month since I started it that, like, I was having a bad day. And would I have drank without it? I don't know, but it was like, fuck, I can't, like today, it was like, I've got this podcast today. Like, I can't, I've got this interview and I can't drink today. I won't. It's not just that I won't, it's like, I can't. If I do, I'm going to like implode everything. Right. So it's been an accountability mechanism for me, and the Instagram chat groups that I started to connect with other people from the app that I was telling you about, like, it's just been phenomenal. People all across the world that I've got friends everywhere now. It's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so important, right? So then it gets you out of your own head. I think I'm like, correct me if I'm wrong, but as soon as you have like a connection 100%. With all these people, it's like, it doesn't feel like it's just this, it feels so much more real. And that's what there is, that TED talk that I always reference. It's like, I think it's something along the lines of like, the opposite of addiction is connection. It's not sobriety, it's connection. That's what we're missing. Well said. That's what we're kind of hiding ourselves from. So totally. That's really cool. That's it's great. It's wonderful. And it's that's just awesome to hear that you're getting so much extra out of that, and that you're building yourself a structure. It's funny that it was like almost a subconscious thing for you, ready to just come to fruition. It just needed that little bit of water. If it was a plant, just needed a little bit of watering, right? So yeah,
I think I got into it and was like, oh fuck, like I can't, like, wow, I really can't drink now. It's like, I will, and I'm accountable. It's not that the people that I'm connected with would love me regardless. Like, I've got friends that will share slips because they trust us, and we're like, hey, it's not, your day count doesn't have to reset just because you had a slip, or, it's not necessarily an all or nothing thing. Some programs, it very much is. And again, whatever program works for someone, they should work that program.
100%.
Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. I am not here to preach reframe app. I'm not, it's just, that's the one that I'm using, and it's working for me. And the people on there have just been so genuine and kind and loving, and they're loving me for who I am now. It's not contingent on, and I'm not saying this that other programs do. I'm just saying in this group of people that I found just love me for me, and they're teaching me how to love me for me. Because I'll tell someone else, it's okay. Try to be gentle with yourself. And I'm thinking, God, if that were me, I would be beating the shit out of myself. So it's been very good to see other people. The community aspect has helped me, because people will share things and I'll go, oh my God, that's me. Like, I thought I was super manipulative, like we talked about self-sabotaging this past few days in some forum somewhere. And I was like, oh God, or somebody shared that in one of our daily Zoom calls. I was like, oh my God, I am not some sociopathic manipulative monster because I self-sabotaged. Like I thought I had convinced myself, like, I'm the worst of the worst. Nobody else does this shit, but people do it. And you know what? I can't love anyone else until I love myself. So the real hard work of sobriety is actually it's not abstaining from drinking. It's to actually sit with yourself and let yourself be who you are. It's hard.
Oh man, it's such a great question though. I mean, we can go off on a whole thing with that.
Oh,
Before
yeah.
we do though, let's shelf that one. I love that idea, sitting with yourself. So between the two of us, one of us will remember. But
I'll write it down. I'll
go.
bring it back up in 2 weeks from now when you're on, if we
Yeah,
don't get back to it.
beautiful. And I was gonna say too, like how for now, how are you when cravings are coming up? What are your things that that you have in your toolbox now that you're using to get through these cravings?
Yeah, I've learned a lot from the Reframe app, and it's funny because they're just kind of recapitulations of things that I've learned before and things that I taught as a chaplain in the Army. Like the Army taught refocusing technique when I went through a very challenging course, very mentally challenging. I mean, there was a lot of fine motor stuff that you had to do for this to learn how to inspect parachutes and stuff, but like they taught you like refocusing technique. And so they said, find a word that helps you just let go of what just happened and focus, ground yourself in the present. I remember my social worker at the VA after I got out had me doing exercises like that, anchor in the present. And so my current app, my refocus word was Mike from Storage Wars, where he goes, yup, because it made me kind of like chuckle and realize like, it's okay. This is kind of life and death, because if you fuck this up, somebody could die, but it's training right now and it's okay. You're learning. You're allowed to make mistakes when you're inspecting parachutes because you're training, because that's how you learn to not make the mistakes when it counts. Right. So I wish I would have used that refocusing technique a lot more with the friggin' fridges at Lowe's or whatever. Right. But the app has been very good. And I'm a wannabe surfer. My happiest memories in life, other than my wedding day and the birth of our boys, has to be when I was in seminary. We lived in Los Angeles area, or we lived in Pasadena area. And I would drive down to the South Bay as often as I could to surf in the pre-dawn, but beat the rush hour and then surf until 9 or 10 a.m. when you could actually drive around LA between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. And so like I would go and paddle out and just, I didn't catch a lot of waves because I kind of sucked, because I really sucked. But they have this one exercise on the app that talks about urge surfing, and you treat your craving as something that is like a wave that comes and goes. And most cravings, studies have shown, last 20 to 30 minutes. And so if you can keep yourself occupied in those 20 to 30 minutes and just sit with yourself, sometimes it's not even that. And folks that have been in recovery a lot longer than I have will say that for them, it's condensed into sometimes just a couple minutes, or even for them 10 or 20 seconds, because they've rehearsed it so many times. But it's not just, it's retraining the Pavlovian response, or the conditioned response, whatever, be it Skinner, whoever I'm bastardizing from my psych minor, and I'm forgetting all these classic studies, but operant conditioning, like the Army tells you, like you shoot the silhouette target, it falls down, and your drill instructor tells you, good job, like boom, someone fell down, good job. Like you get into these conditioned responses, and our conditioned response, even though we're adults, is I'm stressed, I'm going to have a drink. And it's kind of a childish thing to do, but we do it because it's easy and it's socially acceptable. Hell, it's encouraged, right? Yeah. So the challenge is when I get inside my head, it vortexes, and it's like, you're a piece of shit, you're manipulative, you shared that one story on that podcast so that you could get pity, so that you could, like that's what one of our coaches on Reframe app called the itty bitty shitty committee, just gets to talking. And I actually named the committee. I named them Barry for embarrassment, and Gil for guilt, and Seamus for shame. Embarrassment, guilt, and shame are the members of the itty bitty shitty committee. And I basically told them all to fuck off. I fired the itty bitty shitty committee. So, but when they come back, I have to sit with them for a while and let them like, eventually I don't even have to push back. Like my problem is I'm a controller, I'm a doer, man of action. I'm gonna start a podcast. Hell with it. I'm gonna start a podcast. It's not like, seize the initiative and take the fight to the enemy. A lot of this is just sitting still. It's just, Dana, shut up, sit down and sit with yourself and just watch the thoughts and feel the feelings and let them come and let them go. And lo and behold, within a little while, they go. But I know how it feels when you get inside those things where helplessness, even if it doesn't go to helplessness, hopelessness, worthlessness, even if it's just like, God, this is never going to get better, even for something that was as mundane as like, I'm sealing the driveway yesterday. And the thought popped into my head, like, you're not going to make it forever. Like, come on, let's be honest. You know, you're going to drink again one day. And I, I had to just stop and say, okay, I acknowledge that thought. I understand why I'm thinking it, but I don't have to worry about forever. I have to worry about today. And I had my own podcast episode yesterday that I had to look forward to. I had a soccer game with my son last night. I had to go to work at Amazon last night. And I was like, that's how I'm making it through now, is just trying to apply some of the tools that I'm learning. And then also seeing other people that I know and trust doing those things and sharing that those things work for them. It builds credibility for it. It's not just hey, this is someone's friggin' PhD dissertation that, theoretically worked for some guinea pig college students somewhere. But it actually works for real people out here in the real world who are a lot more like me than I realized. And we're all getting through it together. We're just kind of muddling through it together.
For sure. I get the impression, just even from talking to you, like there's been very little gaps in your life where you've had times for like reflection. It seems like you've had life experiences that just sort of layer on top of each other. You got like, children being born with like your time that you're spending in the military. When you're home, crazy. There's the church and religious aspect. You're, still trying to make ends meet with all these different things. Plus the fact that you, by your own admission, have sort of, the attention issues, shall we say. And between all that, like,
thank you for putting it kindly.
Right. So it's like, to me, it just seems like there's this huge, like vast area of your adulthood that there's just been go. So when you do have those periods of reflection and all that, I imagine
what do I do with my hands
for you?
I have no freaking clue what to do.
Right.
And I think that's why it's such a miracle that I stayed sober even for that 1 year, because I was not working and it was COVID and like, I just stayed at home and I started homeschooling the boys and found that I really liked it. And Addie was supportive of that, which was, she's an educator. It's what she went to college to do. And, it was very difficult for her to do that. And I'm very grateful to her for giving me the opportunity to spend more time with our boys, because I was here and gone and everything else. And even when I became a civilian, it was like, I'm can be home, but not really be home, because my brain is still on all the shit that I've got going on at work, or all the shit I've got going on with, school or the house or the whatever else. Cause it's just, there's never really been a time to just sit except for that year. And I did a good job that year, but then just, I let life kind of get to me. I started to have, I've been, such a drama king. I've been having a midlife crisis for like 15 years since our firstborn came into the world. But I just started getting so discouraged and thinking like, really, like, this is not what we thought civilian life was going to be. I thought I was going to go till retirement as a chaplain, and that would have been like my mid to late 40s. And then I would retire and figure something else out. But here I am. I'm like, oh my God, like I sling boxes for a living. But you know what? Like I'm the son of a ship plant worker, man. I'm not ashamed to sling boxes. At least I shouldn't be. And I'm working on not being ashamed of that. And it's a great outlet for all my crazy energy. In the middle of the night, my coworkers are like, what is up with that guy? It's 2 a.m. and I'm running around. But like, I'm learning how to sit, to sit with myself and to accept myself for how I am. And even when I am spastic, even when I am overreacting, because I still do a lot, I'm learning how to just accept myself for who I am and not kick the living shit out of myself for every little thing that I think, say, and do. And trying to recognize that it's not life and death. Shit feels like life and death, but it's not life and death. I'm talking about just most of the things that I catastrophize and make into some mountains out of molehills and all that.
Catastrophize. Awesome word. Love that. Yeah. But you know what? It's like, I think I should say, imagine like that time with yourself for that 1 year where you did have the extra time, where you really had to practice being with yourself and by yourself. As painful or as uncomfortable it may have been, was very much a foundation for this new sobriety that you have now, right? Because you're talking about being able to be with the itty bitty shitty committee and let them talk themselves out. You're doing the Muhammad Ali rope-a-dope with these guys. They talk themselves out. You're just kind of like, are you done? You guys done now? and send them away, right? So you're getting these like this foundation of being able to sit with yourself and be able to, okay, cool, I got this now. When you're talking about control, that's almost like a reverse engineering. Instead of like controlling in the moment, you have the ability to control by just being, by staying. So it's a whole different level in a sense, right? When you look at it like that, I reframing it, essentially reframing control, I guess. Right?
Yeah, it's why it's such a brilliant name for that app. And people say that the other cliche, that's cliches are true. So it doesn't matter that they're cliches. That's what makes them cliches. But exactly, like we're human beings, not human doings. Like totally. I am human no matter what I do. I just need to sit and like just be. And it's ironic because my my Christian days, it was like my favorite verse in the Bible, and even to this day, is Psalm 46 verse 10, which is be still and know that I am God. And I remember praying that backwards: be still and know that I am God, as like a centering prayer. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still, be. But I sucked at it. Like I still suck at it. I'm just such a one of the highest compliments I ever got was from one of the senior non-commissioned officers that I served with in the Army. And he said, "You're a man, sir, you're a man of action." He's from Tennessee. God, I love that guy. And he said, "Sir, you're a man of action." And I just felt so good at that. Like, yeah, man, I'm getting shit done. But the reality is the older I get, the more I realized the less I needed to do all along, and the less I need to do now. And that just is like input, output, error does not compute, because this brain has been trained for decades to think and act a certain way. And so it's just a lot of rewiring neural connections, neural pathways. And, thank goodness for the plasticity of the brain that I'm learning about on this app. And through various podcasts and resources that I'm trying to educate myself about. How does this work physiologically? Like, what the fuck have I been doing to my body by drinking? Like, I've been changing my chemistry, and chemistry. I like to think that I'm above that, but no, or that like, oh well, I've kind of gotten away with eating whatever I want because I got stupid metabolism, and I've always kind of like gotten away with stuff. But man, you're in your early 40s. Like, this is where it's like a tipping point. Like what I do in these few years right here is going to kind of set the tone for the second half of my life.
100%.
I hope it's the second half, not the last third or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But even when you're getting into like, because it resonates with me a lot as far as being like the doer, when you're talking human being versus human doing, the doer mentality of just like, I got to stay busy. There's this like collapsed distinction between like self-worth and action, right? As opposed to just being able to having self-worth of just sitting with yourself. So I totally resonate with that. And I was finding that my doing was actually another addiction. It was a way for me to still get away from myself.
100%.
Because I'm like, I'm doing all this work. Like, no, I have that feeling right now, but I can't feel that because like I am checking emails, and it would just be another way for me to run away from my true feelings.
Totally.
So I don't know if that resonates with you, but I kind of get the impression that might be
100%. Yeah. I mean, boldface 72-point font, all caps. Yes. yes 1,000 times yes. So it's all been distracting myself with shiny objects. And the dopamine that I get from crossing something off my to-do list. I had a friend who said like, here's my to-do list, and when I finish something, it may not show up, but like I don't just like check it off. I like, my camera's not, I'm like,
oh, I see.
I 2 p.m. interviews.
Yeah, man, you get after it. Like,
I destroy it. I destroy tasks is another thing that one of my Army friends said to me.
Destroy.
And I took it as a great compliment. That's right. That makes shit happen, man. But it really became dopamine's, has been my drug of choice. I just found it either through doing stuff and being praised, because I'm just one of my love language is just words of affirmation. And I've been seeking affirmation and worth in everywhere except for myself, and have never accepted myself for who I am. Never was allowed to, and preached and taught. And I don't want to go down the theological rabbit trail or whatever, and I certainly don't want to disparage my Christian roots and my Christian family and friends. For me, in my experience as a Christian layperson and a Christian minister, and then back to being a layperson, was just like, I'm never allowed to just be who I am. I'm never good enough. And I know that my Christian friends and family say, well, but that's the point of, and I get that. But for me, it's like, I needed a hard pause. I needed like a hard pause where I have this period where I go full stop on everything except for me, my wife, and our 3 boys. And that's it. That's my world. And if I get hit by a bus and I'm going to hell because I took a pause for the cause, then off I go. But I cannot run away from myself anymore. And I even used religion to run away from myself. So again, for your Christian listeners or viewers, this is not meant to be judgy at all. I'm just talking about my experience and how I'm learning how to accept myself first, not build my self image out of what does my wife think about me. I mean, obviously I want my wife to think that I'm a good dude, but it doesn't, if I don't like, it's all going to start and end with me. Otherwise it's going to be a bottomless hole. She can't fill that hole. It's unfair of me to expect that for her or anyone else. And so I kind of went on a tangent there, but I think that's been a really essential part of my recovery process over the last couple of years of sitting with myself, to tie it back to what you were talking about. And thanks for letting me share that part.
Yeah, no, for sure. And thank you for sharing with that part. I want to get into your family, but just one last little like anecdote that I had heard that really resonated with me. You know, you hear like a phrase or an analogy or comparison that's like, that's that.
Mm-hmm.
So a friend of mine had mentioned, you know, when you're on the airline and it has the poster of like, if the plane's going down, you got to use the oxygen mask. You got to use the oxygen mask on yourself before you go.
Got to put it on first.
Right. So that's kind of like, I'm like, man, that's a great way to explain exactly what you're mentioning as far as taking care of yourself first, pausing. It's me, how I feel about myself. And then I can turn outward again with 100% of me instead of this, whatever, 75% or whatever you may be running because you've been so worried about the external. You're now complete 100%. And boom, now your relationships are going to be better. You're working, everything else is going to be great. Let's start speaking of relationships. How important has your family been through this time period with you, with your whole, you know, sobriety and everything else?
It's everything. I mean, they're everything. You know, our circle, our social circles have seemed to collapse concentrically into a core. I don't know if this is like, I'm a big astronomy dork. So like, I don't know if I had like the red supergiant or that it starts to collide, you know, the star cycle, it like goes out and then it like starts to collapse back in on itself.
Totally.
And that's kind of what it's felt like. I feel like we're in like neutron star or like white dwarf, brown dwarf phase or something. I don't know, where it's like, it came into us and it, for a while, it was kind of like, just for me, it became the 4 of us. And to a large degree, it still is. And I'm so thankful for these literally hundreds of people that I've met that I consider friends, and I call them sober fam, you know, my sober fam. You are included in that as my sober bro, man.
Sober bros for sure. Thanks, dude.
But it's got to start with me, even in the nucleus of that core. Like it's got to start here. And again, it's not all on me. I do have to have community, and I do need to give to others as part of my community. But again, that my podcast is definitely more about me than it is about anyone else. And I'm trying to own that and not feel bad about that. I'm trying to just say, you're damn right. I'm taking care of you're damn right. This is about me, because for so long it was like, stop making it about you. Stop making it about you. Well, shit, if I would have actually practiced what I preached in the Army, which was don't destroy yourself for the Army, don't commit spiritual adultery with the Army as your lover when, you know, your wife and your kids need you. Don't put yourself in a place where, oh God, Al.
Nice catch.
Yeah.
Brother.
Al's like, no, don't do that. Yeah. Al's with me.
Yes.
You know, of course, if I would have put myself first, it would have helped, but I never did. And because I think the corporate America and any job anywhere, it doesn't have to be the military. And like, you don't have to go to combat zone to have crazy experiences, traumatic or otherwise. Like, you don't have to have this big traumatic, or just life in general. There are so many friggin' pressures on you, and you're supposed to give. But when you actually stop and take care of yourself, people are, you know, it can be, wow, good for him for doing that. But for me, I could never do it, because I'm like, oh God, what if they think I'm being lazy? And I just kept just until I relied on my insane energy until finally my give a shit factor was just gone. It was like, I just, all of a sudden when some stuff happened last year, I just, something switched off, and like the extended family switch went just off. The God switch off. It's not even that I'm like agonizing over stuff anymore. It's like, it's just, it just went away, evaporated. I was like, it is me and the people inside this home. And you know, there are other people that I love, and that I'm not saying like screw everyone, like I haven't talked to anyone else, but in terms of priorities, I've been trying to focus here. But even then, you can see with me, not even 10 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago tonight, I was getting shit faced in a hotel room. I mean, like stumbling drunk, right? And here, if even then I wasn't focusing on myself. I said, "Oh, I'm focusing on my family," but I was still not wanting to sit with myself. So now comes the hard work of cracking pint-sized Monster cans instead of pint-sized Miller High Life or whatever. And again, I'm probably overdoing it, transfer addiction, but I don't care. I think my central nervous system can handle it because I'm freaking nuts. I guess.
That's fine.
I don't know if that answered your original question. Speaking of ADHD, I don't remember what the original question was.
It definitely did. Yeah. Just about your basically your family and your relationships, and how, like you say, it's kind of like, it's gotten to that core again.
Yep.
If very intentionally, for the reason of, and eventually it'll start relaxing back. But what you needed to do is pause, bring things back to what is the absolute most bare bones important to you right now, which is your family. And like you're saying, you're not forgetting about the periphery, but just for now, this is what I have to focus on. Right.
Yeah. So I have these thoughts that'll come into my head. Well, what would your friends from when you served in the Rangers think of you? What would your soldiers think? What would those Rangers, those barrel chested, badass freedom fighters that you look up to, who are just the most amazingly heroic dudes that I mean, I was just to be in the same room with them, let alone, go to Afghanistan with them and stuff. And I think, what would they think of me? And it's like, it doesn't fucking matter what they would think of me. It doesn't. I mean, I love them. I love them like family, and I would die for them and they would die for me. Like, absolutely. But at the end of the day, none of that matters. And so for me, there's almost this like hard fork in my life where like it's needed to be a clean break for some time, where like Addie and I had just loved the Army so much, and it was such a family, and we depended on it so much for everything from healthcare to social connections to just income and everything, all our support structures. And now we've just been stumbling around in the dark for several years. My last National Guard weekend was 5 years ago this week, I think. And
oh, wow.
I mean, it's been a hell of a 5 years, and a hell of a couple of years before, 3 years before that, as we transitioned out of active duty. It's just been a meat grinder. So I said all that to say, like, for me, when the voices come, and I dream about the Army every night. And so I'm able to ignore those thoughts, or I'm able to let those thoughts pass during the day, and I don't consciously think about them a lot. But it'll be, what about the people at the soup kitchen that I worked with? And what about people from my church? And, what about these people wherever from my life? And it doesn't matter. It just doesn't. And I'm not trying to be like, screw all them. It's just where I'm at right now. It needs to be here, and it needs to start in here. And Al and I are going to work on that together. We'll work out from there.
Yeah. No, like you say, and it doesn't matter in a sense that you don't need to get attached to the thoughts. You corrected yourself. You mentioned it's like, you don't ignore the thoughts. You just allow them, and you don't have to grab onto them as they go by. They can just go by. It's all good again. And then that directs you back to where it needs to go. That's inside you. Right. So,
Alan Watts has been super helpful for me. I don't remember how I got stuck, how I found him, but man, I listened to him. I binged Alan Watts last year, and he has been, obviously I relapsed and I stopped listening and stopped applying what I learned. But now I think it was all, like you said, laying a foundation. And now I hadn't thought of that until you mentioned it here, that summer of 2020 to summer 2021, even though I relapsed and it got even worse that time into this winter, it did lay a foundation. There were things that happened in that year that prepared me for this, that made this different. It made me realize I need community but I can't depend on community. Ultimately, it has to be something that I'm doing for myself first.
For sure. Absolutely. It can't be one thing, right? It can't just be
Yeah.
willpower. It's got to be this layered, you know what I mean? I'm sure you can relate to that with whether it's church, whether it's family, whether
Yeah.
it's in the army. There's multi layers to make everything work, right? So
And that's why
sobriety,
AA, you know, again, I'm
right?
not doing a 12-step program, but that's why AA talks about needing to have a higher power. And that's one of the reasons why I've struggled with, because God and I are we're not talking right now.
Yeah,
so, you know, I've struggled with that, but you know, I mean, right now to be, you know, Al is my higher power right now. And, you know, I listen to this wonderful podcast called Fucking Sober, where Katie Mack narrates it, and it's mostly non-fictional, but there's some fiction in it, but she writes a character, and she has Kevin the koala as her higher power when she starts AA.
Nice.
And she prays the serenity prayer to Kevin. Kevin, grant me the serenity.
Tremendous.
You know, it's brilliant. So like, yeah, it has to be, it's this interesting duality of, it is all on me, but it's not all on me. It's kind of both and.
Well, and for sure too. And like, I like how you're even mixing some humor in what is otherwise very, let's face it, very dark, potentially. Some, you know, and so you got, and that's what's great about this community and just the nature of yours and my conversation. There's that dynamic of adding humor, you know, with the owl, but also some seriousness. Like you're honestly like using him as like an anchor, potentially, like, so it's this, again, this interesting duality of humor with the real darkness. There has to be both sides. Just gotta be the dark and the light, right? The yin, the yang, the duality.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And somebody had said to me, they really liked the name I Kissed Alcohol Goodbye, because it was kind of playful, that it brought some levity, to a little bit of levity to, you know, what is otherwise like, you know, I mean, it is life, and it is life or death. It could be death for me, even if I didn't drink myself into, you know, medical addiction and cirrhosis and die or whatever from that. I mean, I absolutely could have crashed a car and killed myself or something. I could have done something really dumb while I was drunk and ended up dead. So yeah, I mean, I in a place in my life where I talk to inanimate objects, but it doesn't mean, you know, Al's looking at me like, what are you saying? He's like, no, I'm a person too. He is.
Yeah, exactly.
Alcohol free, my buddy.
What I get from your show too is like the I Kissed Alcohol Goodbye. There's like, it's like a tip of the cap. There's like a nostalgia, the acknowledgement of the nostalgia that drinking holds, the traditions or, you know what I mean, the things that do come along with it. So there is an acknowledgement of that, which is powerful as well, because you're not running away from it. There is an acknowledgement of the fact that there's a lot of, you know, I like the word nostalgia personally, because for me, it's
that's perfect,
right? There's so much ceremony behind drinking.
And we don't have to let go. A friend that I've made on Instagram, I had put a hashtag on one of my first Al posts or something. It said AF c'est chouette, because in French, I'm studying French, and I went to Strasbourg on exchange program in high school, and I've always loved French culture, love the language. And so I'm actually trying to study it with Duolingo and everything. So chouette in French is like a way to say cool, like French. I don't know how much they actually say it now, but at least when I learned it forever ago, 20 some years ago, it was chouette means cool. So I thought it's owls, man. Yeah. So so I had this friend messaged me, and she said, is that French in your hashtag? And I said, yeah, because, you know, it's a little double entendre there, but we were chatting, and I was saying something about Strasbourg, and oh my God, like I remember all these, you know, we went to the brasserie and ordered, you know, Les Grands Blondes were these huge beers that were like this, you know, blonde, this kind of Americanish. I mean, it was better than American lager, but you know, a blonde beer, and it was really good, and they were big, and we were 17 years old. We're like, oh my God, we're drinking in a real bar. This is amazing. So and I told her it's probably bad that I look back and laugh about those things now, because I mean, you know, like stupid shit could happen when I drank as a teenager and even as an adult. And she says, and I'm so thankful for her saying, no, you know, it's okay. Like we can keep our memories. Like we can still have the past. We can still look back and say, for a while, alcohol served me. And whether it's luck or destiny or divine providence or whatever you want to assign to it that got you through, that I didn't end up dead from it. I can look back and say alcohol was a part of my story for a while. And yes, I'm a very nostalgic person. So I think that's the perfect word for it is. And again, I look back, it's almost like a breakup. It's like, I really miss her later at night. So I'm like, God, I just want to sit with her And,
Yeah.
you know, like, I mean, there's even like that. I'm like, you know, you're like smooching the can or whatever.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know how like
Yeah.
Freudian we're going to get with this whole thing, but
Yeah, definitely. Right. Yeah. Well, it's funny. Like, so for me, one of the big things that'll always be like drinking is always going to be a reward for me. So I always have like, I got my tall boys of, like bubbly, like the carbonated water, basically.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's how it is. Like, I'm going to make sure that I got like a 12 pack. If I'm going camping, I'm going to make sure I have the equivalent of a 12 pack of like bubbly water versus, or like even in the 0% beer, whatever it needs to be for me to be able to still enjoy it. Cause like, if I'm just going to sit there with a bottle of water, I'm gonna be like, well, this is boring.
This is stupid. Yeah. Like
so
at least get some fizz. Let's do something.
Let's get some fizz.
I actually just ordered a soda stream type thing, knockoff one yesterday because I've heard multiple people talk about it. I'm like, screw it. For all that I've spent on Monsters in the last month, it'll pay for itself in a month.
Oh, for sure. And yeah, guaranteed. The soda stream, whatever knockoff version you have, is either way, like highly recommend just like soda stream with some like you know that real lime, like lime juice that you can get.
The lime, that's what I need.
That's like
to
my number one drink of all time.
Okay.
And but it's funny you mentioned too, because there was actually a good quote from Russell Brand, and I think this might, I don't know if you heard this one, but he mentioned he's actually jealous of the old Russell Brand because the old Russell Brand still used to be able to do all these things carefully.
Yeah.
So there is some part of that he acknowledges, and again, that's what this is all about, is like acknowledging, not ignoring or storing or pushing away. So, and I'm like, man, that's a very, you know, on the subject of nostalgia, I'm like, that's a very unique way of putting it, being jealous of your old self, still being able to do that. Right. And kind of like allowing that, right. And allowing that feeling and just go, okay, what is that? How does that feel with me now? And how has that changed compared to like the old version of me and that? So I thought that was an interesting way, just on the subject of nostalgia. One other thing that brought up when you said was it Le Grand Blonde? But I also like the non-alcoholic French word. There's a sans alcool.
Sans alcool,
that sounds cool, man. I've used that as a hashtag. This is sans alcool.
Sans alcool. I love it.
Isn't it awesome? I love that one.
Totally.
Dude, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Fantastic guest today. I blew away my expectations. I had high expectations for you simply because of just I'm really enjoying the whimsical but real, genuine nature of your posting and everything. So I'm very much looking forward to your being on your podcast. I kissed alcohol goodbye. And
Can't wait to have you, man.
Of course. Are you willing to do a quick little rapid fire round with me before I let you?
Yes, of course. I'm game for anything, man. Let's do it.
Rad. Okay. So where did your energy first go when you sobered up? Sounds like the podcast, but fill in the blanks.
Probably into the podcast, I think. I mean, it was a month later, but yeah, it went into Instagram initially and then into the podcast.
Cool. Excellent. And soon to be didgeridoo by the sounds of it.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah, man. Learn how to circle breathe.
Yeah, exactly. No problem. If you learn French, you can do the cycle breathing, certainly.
Absolutely.
But can you do the cycle breathing in French? I don't think that's even.
That will be next level. That'll be April of 23. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Where, if anything, feels out of balance for you right now? What has been the most challenging part of this current stint of sobriety for you?
Oh God. That's a good question. I'm trying to rapid fire answer. I would say still just the work balance, just because like I worked last night from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. Well, I got to leave at like 3. Okay. So just still working overnight, even just one night a week, is still kind of throwing me off. Sometimes it can take me a couple days just to recover from even working one night because of that weird cycle. So that's probably still a little bit out of balance, and just trying to figure out, am I going to continue at Amazon after I get my 6-month bonus, or am I going to like say peace? So we'll
hopefully
see.
Nobody from Amazon's listening to right now.
No, never.
Yeah. No, you got the next 15 years of Amazon.
That's
yes,
right.
Of course.
That's right.
So yeah, work-life balance. Yeah, okay, that's that. I could see where that would definitely, especially overnights, dude, because that's just going to throw a bunch of your
stuff
off,
and
right?
That's why I was trying to do 3 or 4 nights a week, and that was contributing to drinking. I was coming home at 4 a.m. and drinking myself to sleep, and then waking up at noon to do homeschool in the afternoon with the boys instead of doing it in the morning. So
talk about a grinder.
No bueno.
Yeah, no, exactly. No bueno. It's all sorts of different languages here today.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay, if you could add one thing to your life right now, if you had a magic wand and you could add just one element or one enhancement to your life, what would it be?
I can't say alcohol. I want Miller High Lives back in my life. Sorry, trigger warning.
Not be a good way to wrap things up here with that.
No. If I could add one thing, I was thinking today as I'm walking around the house, I'm like, God, this house was a nightmare when we moved in. But it was one of those, oh God, we could have been on HGTV with we got the keys and we came in, we're like, yes, finally, it's the dream. Oh my God, look at all this shit that the inspector missed. And our realtor had done this really weird, bad stuff. And it was awful. So I'm walking around today going I'm laying in right before we got on the call, we did outside time for the boys to wrap up homeschool day because it's going to rain here soon. And so we went outside to get fresh air. And I just got in the hammock in the backyard because it's 70 degrees here today. Finally, Ohio, talk about crazy split personality. That's Ohio this time of year. It could be 25 tomorrow and it's 80 yesterday.
Oh wow.
But I just laid on the hammock and I watched my sons playing in the yard and I was like, you know what? I've basically got everything that I've ever wanted or needed. So I guess the thing that I would want would be the ability to enjoy, there we go. Right here on my freedom from the desire to want to know from the Tao Te Ching. I'm listening to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery podcast, which is really cool. It's hosted by this guy with this Tennessee type Southern accent, not the guy that you would expect to be hosting it, but just really fascinating stuff. So for me, the thing that I would want is freedom from the desire to want to know.
Nice.
That's what I would want.
Great answer.
To not want it. I would want to not want anything.
Amazing. Cool. What are you currently listening to? If we were to, whether it could be audiobook, it could be podcast, it could be music. What are you currently listening to?
Yeah. Last night, I listened to a short story and I've forgotten the name. It was called A Letter to My Rage. It was written by this feminist lady and I've forgotten her name and it was really good. I'm listening to The Gates of Europe by Serhiy Plokhy. I'm probably going to butcher his name. My oldest is studying Russian and I'm totally butchering that beautiful language, but it's a history of Ukraine. I'm reading fiction wise. I'm reading a book called Such a Beautiful Thing. And there's some extended title to it. It's a kind of like a post-apocalyptic fiction and it's brilliant. And then I'm listening to sober podcasts. Favorite one, the Tao Te Ching Recovery one and Sober Awkward is these two British ladies who live in Australia and they're freaking hilarious. And they're you talk about genuine, thank you. That's genuine. If there's one word that I want to describe me, if I could have an epitaph, here lies a genuine dude. Nice. Even if I'm a hot mess, I want to be a genuine hot mess. And these ladies are so genuine. They're so funny and so real and down to earth. And I've enjoyed that podcast among others, but and I'm listening to a French podcast called Marie sans filtre, which means Marie without a filter or, Marie unfiltered. And she is she describes herself as une journaliste feministe militante. So she's I don't know why I'm listening to a bunch of militant feminists right now, but it's but it's been good. It's fascinating. I love it. I don't know.
That's great.
I'm trying to broaden my horizons, man.
Love it. That's good stuff. Finally, if you could travel to one location on planet Earth, where and why?
Oh God, I've gotten to see so many cool places so far. I mean, I think I've always wanted to go to Australia, but maybe even Tasmania, just because it's even more exotic. I would also say Iceland. I think I had met someone last month through my side hustle, which is a writing business, and this lady had reached out to me I did this Google Ads campaign, and the last place I expected to hear from was Iceland, but she's like, hey, can you help me with this writing project? I'm like, hell yeah, it was so cool. So I think going to Reykjavik, but then getting out and seeing more of Iceland would be on the bucket list for sure.
Very good answer. Yeah, my fiance and I have always talked about just getting a camper van and doing the whole perimeter of Iceland and just
totally.
It'd be so cool. It's
it'd be
not of
amazing.
This world. Some of these areas over there. Yeah. So great
answer.
Great answer. And this is the final question for you, Dana today.
Awesome.
What is the biggest thing that you've always wanted to do, but have not done yet? And what is preventing you from doing so?
Oh man. I did jump out of an airplane. I mean, I jumped out of an airplane a bunch of times with the Army, but that's different. Paratrooping is different than parachuting. I mean, it's still parachuting, but it's different than skydiving. So I did do skydiving with my wife once. We were each tandem. She and I didn't tandem. It wasn't hey, let's go. I'll try to figure this out. But I've always probably wanted to bungee jump, and there's some Instagram feed that's like adventure or whatever, and it shows these people doing these crazy ass zip lines and bungees and all this kind of stuff. I think the bungee jumping is something that I would want to do, but I'm scared because of I don't know, the whole idea of jumping off the bridge thing.
It is terrifying.
I don't know.
It is terrifying.
It's kind of scary. Heights is my thing, which is funny because I can stand in the door of an aircraft, you know, at 1,000 feet as a jump master and be totally fine. But you put me on something that's attached to the ground, I'm a hot mess. So that's bungee jumping and fear.
Bungee jumping, nice. You know, the most terrifying version of bungee jumping is like the hot air balloon bungee jumping. So
oh my God. Oh, ew, you just made like the hair on the back of my, like, I take it back. I wouldn't be able to do that. Oh God, that's terrifying.
You could do it off like the Cleveland Bridge, but maybe, or the Cleveland Dam or whatever it is, but not out of a hot air balloon. Fair enough.
Dana, I'm gonna have nightmares about that tonight.
Fantastic to get to know you. This is our first
Likewise.
meeting. So dude, so grateful. There we go. The old fist bump through the and thank you, Al, for joining me.
Al.
Yes.
Yeah, man.
Rad. And
I can't wait to interview Al, and I'll looking forward to chatting with you and getting to know more of your story.
Yeah,
letting you get a word in edgewise here in a couple of weeks, man. It'll be awesome.
Yes, exactly. That'll be my chance to do my big brah. I'm very similar to you as far as like when the tap comes on, it just starts coming. So
out it comes, buddy.
Which is
great. Match made in heaven, man.
Yeah,
great to have you as a new friend.
Awesome. And other than that, thank you so much. As far as this finding on Instagram, I will have it in there, but your podcast is like Kissed Alcohol Goodbye. Basically any streaming site you can find it. Apple.
It's on it's almost all of them, even like Stitcher and a bunch of other like Pocket Casts and all, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and I have a YouTube channel too by the same name where you can see the episodes in video, and Spotify's supporting streaming the video now too. So I usually try to do my episodes the same way that you're doing it, which is video, and then just transfer it to. So yeah, just hop on Google and I Kissed Alcohol Goodbye, and I think I got a pretty good search result. My SEO is doing pretty well. So
there we
go.
Happy
about that.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
Thank you with so all much, the 100 people that have listened to me. But hey, it's all good. I don't care if we can help one. That's all that matters. And that's another cliche, but it's true.
100% true. That's why cliches are cliches, as you mentioned.
Indeed.
Right? Awesome. We'll leave it with that. Thank you so much, Dana.
Thank you, brother. Look forward.